Good morning, students. So we are starting our week today, October 12th, Monday, and you will notice that for our first math assignment, you have a worksheet, and we will be continuing to work in our book and developing our knowledge of fractions. But for today, we are going to practice adding fractions with like denominators once more, just to make sure that you are very familiar with the process before we move on to our next fractions assignment. So what I'm going to do is, because we don't have book work, I'm going to give you a few examples of how to add fractions with like denominators one more time. And you can also go back to Friday's video where I also teach how to add fractions. So I'm going to give a few examples here and you will be very familiar with them, and you're going to use the same principles on your worksheet. So it would be Monday's worksheet for math, which is included in the email. So let's do just a few examples. Let's add 2 over 7 plus 3 over 7. So remember, when we have like denominators, we don't actually need to worry as much about the denominator, which, as you know, is the number on the bottom. So what we're going to do is add the number on the top. So we have 2 plus 3, 5, and the denominator stays the same, as we learned. But then we have our second step. And our second step is to decide whether or not our solution is an improper fraction. Now, we know that an improper fraction would have the higher number on top, and this is 5 over 7, so the lower number is on top. So we know that this is not an improper fraction. And then step 3 would be to reduce if needed. But there is no number that fits perfectly into 5 and perfectly into 7. So we know that this number cannot be reduced, and therefore this is our answer simply. Now let's do one that's a tad more challenging. So we're going to do 4 over 7 plus 5 over 7. So here we have the same denominator for now, and we're adding the top. So we have 4 plus 5 is 9. And the denominator is 7. Now here we do have an improper fraction. So we need to remember, how do we make an improper fraction into a mixed number? And we learned that we divide. So we divide the bottom number into the top number, the numerator by the denominator, and simply divide. So 7 goes into 9 once. 7 times 1 is 7. 9 minus 7 is 2. And then we have the trick of the up, down, left. And we have 1 and 2 over 7. And then our third step would be to reduce, and we do not have any numbers that fit perfectly into 2 and 7, so this is our solution. So your worksheet for today has the same principles, just with different numbers. So just make sure that you determine whether or not they're improper, and if they are, you change them to a mixed number, and then determine if they need to be reduced. So just a review for today, and tomorrow we will be starting brand new with adding mixed numerals. And for today, for our language arts assignment, we have 2 pages starting with unit 3. So we have finished our basic unit on nouns, and now we are beginning unit on sentences and sentence parts, which we have already learned a few sentence parts by learning about subjects and predicates. But now we're going to just go into it a little bit more, understanding a little bit more about subjects. So here we have combining ideas with compound subjects. So I'm going to read, and you guys can read along with me, and of course we will continue to go over this during our Zoom meeting at 11. So we have Lewis explored the Northwest Territory. Clark explored the Northwest Territory. These 2 groups of words are sentences because they both have subjects and verbs and complete thoughts. They do not sound very good, however. They are redundant. That is, they repeat the same words unnecessarily. Can you think of a way to combine these 2 sentences into one better sentence? So we did a little bit of this earlier. So we know that when you have two sentences that are expressing the same predicate, we can often combine it into one sentence. So we have here these two sentences that can be actually made into one by saying Lewis and Clark explored the Northwest Territory. So because they both explored the Northwest Territory, we don't need to say both of them in two separate sentences. So for an official definition, it says a compound subject is two or more connected subjects that have the same verb. The most common connecting words are and or. So this may be a little familiar as we've done a tiny bit of it in our verbs section. The most common connecting words are and or. So I want you to keep that in mind as you are completing your very own compound subjects. So it says here, Lewis and Clark explored the Northwest Territory. So just remember, oftentimes we have to underline our verb twice, and that's what they're doing here. Molly and her sister often cook dinner. So this is pretty much saying we could say Molly often cooks dinner. Her sister often cooks dinner. But that sounds like we're saying it over and over and doesn't sound as good as Molly and her sister often cook dinner. Either Kansas City or Topeka is the capital of Kansas. So just another way to simplify those two sentences into one. So what you're doing on the bottom here, you just have three, and you're going to improve these pairs of sentences by combining them into one. And because you have a few other exercises that will be very similar, I'm going to do the first one with you. So here it says, Scott painted the porch. Tim painted the porch. Now, if you were speaking to somebody, you wouldn't say it like that because it is much simpler to just say, Scott and Tim painted the porch. And that's what you would write. So you're going to do the same with these two, simplifying both of those sentences. And then here for Think B, it says to underline the verbs 2 times. We're very used to doing that, identifying those action words, identifying the state of being verbs. And then you're going to underline the subjects 1 time. We often do that too. But the third step is something new. So you're going to write simple in the blank if the sentence has a simple subject, or compound if the sentence has a compound subject. So all you're doing is underlining the verbs twice as usual, underlining the subjects once, and then you're going to take a look and notice if there's more than one subject or if there's just one. If there's just one subject, you're going to write simple. But if you notice that it's adding more than one subject, usually combined with the word and or. So your key is to search for ands and ors, because usually those two words are combining subjects, and when they do, you're going to write compound in the left. And then here on the bottom, you're doing the same thing, but you're underlining the verbs twice, underlining the subjects once, but you're just looking for compound subjects and verbs, but just look for them, identify them. You don't have to circle or underline them, but it's nice to start getting used to looking for whether or not the subjects are compound, how they were able to simplify the sentences. So up here, you're actually writing whether or not they are simple and compound. But here on the bottom, you're just doing the underlining the verbs twice as usual, underlining the subjects once as usual, and then just looking. And of course, over our Zoom, we can discuss them further. And here we have our list 8 for spelling. So we have a brand new list, and your list is up in Spelling City as well. So I encourage you to go to Spelling City when you're done with your work and just complete a few activities so that you better understand the spelling and the meaning of our words. So we're starting here with our pattern words, and here we go with the pronunciations. So we have scald, ought, foster, sought, coffee, saucer, flawed, naughty, recalled, cautious, alternate, chalkboard. Then for our content words, we have pistil, sepals, foliage, stamen, botanist, pollinate, fragrance. And for our vocabulary words, we have formal, inform, revival, and revive. And as usual, we have our pattern words assignment for our first page. And what we're doing is sorting out the O words, the words that sound like awe, but they have an O. So we have words in our pattern word list that sounds like awe, but they're actually an A before an L. And we'll go over a few examples. Then we have the aw sound that sounds like A-U-G-H, the aw sound that sounds like A-U, aw as A-W, aw as A-U-G-H, and aw as just an O on its own. So you're just writing in the words that are spelled in this way, but all of them actually have the aw sound. So for numbers 1 through 4, the A before L. So you're going to look for words that have A in front of an L, and they're pretty easy to find. We have our very first one, scald, ald, that is an aw sound, and it comes before an L. So that means that definitely 1 out of 1 through 4 is going to be scald. So we'll just write it here as an example. And that's what you're going to do from numbers 1 through 4. Then for number 5, you're going to look for an A-U-G-H word, a word that has A-U-G-H blended together, and so on and so forth. Taking a peek at the spellings, just important to note that these words have an aw sound in them. Then, of course, we have our content word section where you have a hint that helps you determine what your pattern word is, or your content word is. However, we notice that we have 2 S words and 2 P words. So that means that if you have read your sentence completely and are unsure about which P word or which S word fits in your sentence, then you must go to your spelling dictionary in the back of the book so that you can determine the meaning, and it will better help you to fill out the sentences. So definitely read these out loud. Don't just fill it in because you know that the first letter is given to you, because as you read them out loud and understand the meaning, the assignments that are upcoming will be made much easier for you. And of course, we will discuss this over Zoom at 11. We have our book project continuing today. We are on chapter 11, which, if I am not mistaken, it is talking about Aslan, and it is, so we are on chapter 11 today. We will have our read along at 11 after our question and answer time for language, spelling, and math. So be sure to bring your book with you and read along with me so that you can be all set to complete your book project assignments. And just a quick note for science. So I will be discussing this over our Zoom meeting, but if there's any chance that you can't make it today, just notice here for chapters 1.8, which is what we're doing in science, that there's no page number. Remember that my teacher book is different than your student book. So you're just going to go right after your chapter checkup that you completed on Friday and find section 1.8, Composites Meet the Family, where it's going to talk about some plants, flowering plants. So I know there's no page number because up until now I'm unsure which page number is in your book because mine is a little off. But as soon as we have our meeting, I will find out what student book number it is, and then I can make sure to include that. So just look for section 1.8. read that, and then you will have a comprehension check, and of course we can look over, read along together, and answer any questions on flowering plants.